One of the features of Tall Emu is to allow you to perform simple automations when things happen. And you access that feature through the admin menu. Uh, and here we see the automations menu. Now, by default, that's all going to be empty because you won't have any defined. So we've got some sample ones here that we're going to run through. I'll start off though quickly just by explaining what automations are and how they work. So the automation is something that happens, a set of tasks or activities, things that happen triggered by something in the CRM. So an example might be every time a quote gets updated, we want to email the sales manager letting them know that a quote's been updated. We might want to do something a little more refined and say, for example, every time a quote is accepted and the quote is worth more than, say, $10,000, only then email the sales manager. Um, the idea being that we're able to go and trigger these automations based on events that happen in and around your CRM data, um, then causing a set of actions to occur. Now, I'm deliberately sort of repeating myself here on triggers and actions, because if you can understand triggers and actions, trigger is the cause, actions are the set of things that happen afterwards, then you probably already are going to understand automations. So what we'll do is we'll do a new one. So we hit the new automation button, and we can see on the left-hand panel, we get here triggers. So we've got triggers for when a record is updated, when a record is created, um, on a schedule, when a web form is submitted, or when an order is ready for pickup. So starting with an obvious one, when a record is updated, what we're going to do here is we're going to select that one. And so now I get my options. And the simplest way of doing this would be just to drop down and pick one of these records. Now I'm just going to go and pick quote, and we can ignore everything else. So this trigger is when a quote is updated, and there is no filters at the moment on this. Now, that means that every time somebody updates a quote in your CRM, every single time, this workflow is going to run. So that could cause a lot of noise. So what we might do is we might say, okay, let's only do it when one of these fields is updated. So I'll pick the status, and have I got total X tax? So now this workflow, this automation, sorry, will only run every time a quote's updated and only when one of those fields is updated. So I can further refine that by, instead of selecting always, say based on criteria. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to further refine that. Total X tax is greater than $5,000. So again, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but what we've done is we've said record updated, the record type is quote. We're only going to do this when the status or the total is updated. So when the quote changes status or the total changes, and it's over $5,000. So now we're going to hit the next button. And this gives us our palette of actions. So the neat thing here is we've tried to make this as easy as possible to use. So if I drag on send email, it'll just drop down, it'll auto link. We can click on here with a right click and remove these links. We can click here, right click, and remove these objects as well. And we just drag on as many as we require. Now, our first step here is going to be sending an email. So to configure the email, we just double click. So the caption is just what displays here. So I might just want to change that to be notify Ames, and it wants to know some simple things. So who am I sending the email to? If I wanted to send it to a particular user in CRM, I can just do that. Who's it coming from? Again, I can pick a user in CRM and what template am I sending. Now, these are just some default email templates. You'd make your own. And it might be just a notification saying, hey, a quote worth $5,000 or more has just changed status, or the value of the quote has changed, thereby making it, of interest to you. Now, we do have the option to attach the actual quote PDF if we wish, and we can attach other documentation as well, which we won't bother with right now. So that's our simplest use of send email. But we actually have another thing we can do here. So if I go drag this across, what if I wanted to email the customer? Now, obviously, we can't just drop down from this list and send an email, select the customer. That wouldn't make sense. We don't know who the customer is. It's going to be different for every single workflow. So what we do here is we highlight relative. Relative means relative to the thing that we're doing the workflow on, the automation on, which in this case is quotes. So relative to the quote, who could we possibly send an email to? So we could send it to the person it's assigned to. We could send it to the company's, the quotes company assigned to, or the quotes company's primary contact, billing addresses, account manager, who created it. The one that we probably actually want is the sent to in this case. So what we're doing here is we're saying, relative to the quote, look at who the send to is, which is going to be a person, and that's who we're going to send this email to. And then who's it coming from? Now, again, we could just select a user, but one of the things that we often want to do is have one of these quotes coming from the sales team. So again, what we could do is we could choose relative. We can drop that down and choose assigned to. Everything else is now the same. So what's going to happen is when this email gets sent, we're going to look at the CRM. We're going to see who the quote was sent to, the salesperson or the person in the business that the quote is currently assigned to, and that's how it's going to be sent. That I think is a really neat way of doing it. If this was a job, you'd have the job assigned to. If it were an opportunity, you'd have the opportunity assigned to. And the neat thing about this is if you put custom fields on there, so you might have, for example, say, a credit manager applied to a company. You could actually have that email then using the relative function, have that email sent to a credit manager. So that is about the simplest automation that we can do. And the one thing we have to remember is that we tick it to be active. So we can save this now. If we don't tick it to be active, it's not going to work. So we'll save it and take a second to save. And that now is stored in my system. So the next one that we might just try is with a different trigger. So what we'll do is we'll go and have a look at this one here, respond smartly on web form submissions. So in case you don't know, Tall Emu has a web form system. One of the things we can do is run automations based on people filling in the web forms. So let's go and have a look. So the first thing I'm going to do before we get into this is I'm going to click here and go back to my trigger. And what we've done is we selected when a web form is submitted. And in this case, I've selected the Contact Us web inquiry form. What we now have is all of this. Now, what I've done here is I've replicated a workflow, an automation, a work process, whatever we want to call it, that we put in place for a customer a few years ago. Now, a few years ago, probably more than a few years ago, this was all done manually by hand. Nowadays, we can just do this using the automation engine. So let's go and take a look at what we're trying to achieve here. What we want to do is this. Immediately that the web form is submitted, we want to send the customer an email that says something like, hey, thanks a lot for filling in our web form. Somebody's going to contact you soon. The next thing we want to do is we want to check until we're within working hours. And if we're not, we want to wait until we're in working hours. And the reason for that is that what we want to do is we want to send an email from the salesperson that we ultimately assigned this record to the customer. So what we want the customer to see is a web form's filled in. They get an automated looking email from, webmaster at yourcompany.com saying, thanks for filling in the form. Somebody will be in contact soon. And then soon we're going to send an email from the salesperson, which is that contact. And you do this kind of thing if you've got lots of leads and you're really trying to separate the sheep from the goats. So we know how to use the send email. So what we'll do is we'll just open that up very quickly and we can see we're sending it to the contact on the opportunity, because this is filling in an opportunity from admin team using the template. Thanks for contacting us. Then what we're doing is we've dragged on one of these wait functions over here, and I'll show you how that works. We're waiting until a weekday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Now, my other options are just waiting until a time of day, waiting until a weekend. Weekday's the one I fixed. But you can also use this to delay a fixed amount of time as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use, first of all, the wait. And what this will do is if you run this process outside of those hours, then our flowchart stops here until 8 o'clock in the morning. However, if it's sometime between 8 and 5 on a weekday, it'll just run straight through and go to the next one. So this is why we've added a wait here, because if somebody filled in this form, say at midday, we don't want it to send an email and then immediately send another email. That's going to break the illusion of it being assigned to a salesperson and then sent to a customer. So we're just going to wait 15 minutes. I'll double click, and all we've done is we've said a fixed amount of time, 15 minutes, and save that. Now what we've done is we've dragged on an assign. So what the assign does is I think we can guess, it assigns the record, it sets the assign to field. And if I open that up and have a look, we've got an allocation method. So we're assigning, in this case, it's an opportunity because it's a web form that completes an opportunity. What are we going to do? So I could simply say, assign it to this user, or I could say, assign it to a team. That's one approach. What I could also do is I could do a round robin. So Mike gets one, Jane gets one, Fred gets one. We can do that. Or we can pop in place a balanced round robin. The balanced round robin basically does exactly the same, except what it does is it makes sure, so in this case we have opportunities. What it would do is for each person, it will balance the amount of open opportunities that they have. And then there's a final tweak to this. How are we actually going to do the balancing? So are we going to do it at the team level? So in other words, we're going to look at the opportunity and say, well, Mike has 5, Jane has 10. So Mike's going to get the next 5 of these to bring him up to be balanced with Jane. Or is it going to be at the workflow level? So just this automation. In other words, we're going to say how many of these are we going to be giving to each of the team members? So based just on this particular automation here. So that might be if you've got lots of different lead types and lots of different contact forms, and maybe your opportunities have got different value, you might want to allocate, for example, let's say a spare parts lead equally between the sales team. You might also get, brand new car leads or something like that. You want to balance those equally in the sales team, but you wouldn't want it to be, okay, well, Mike's got, $50 million worth of leads and Jane's got $5,000 worth of leads just because of the order that those leads come in. So it just gives you a little bit of flexibility. And then again, we have the send email, which in this case is the more detailed answer. So what we've done here is we've basically said a web form's filled in. If it's within working hours, 15 minutes later, we assign it to somebody on the sales team, and then we send our email from that sales team member to the customer. If it's outside of working hours, it'll wait here until it's within working hours. Then it will wait 15 minutes, and then it'll do the assigning and the send email. And so what this particular automation does for the business basically is make it so that every customer, every lead gets a real quick response. Then it gets assigned to a salesperson within 15 minutes during working hours, and they get an email, in this case, purportedly from that sales person. So it looks like, you're giving really, really good service. Well, in fact, you are giving really, really good service. I'll jump back to my automation list again. and I'll show you something slightly more complex. So this one I have update key fields when a quote gets accepted. So what we're doing here is we're saying, just go back to my trigger page. If a quote's accepted, so when a quote is updated, only when the status changes, only when the status starts with accepted, or is accepted in this case, this is what we're going to do. So I also have the ability to update and create records. So let's look at update account. What we're saying here is we're going to update our account. What are we doing? So this is an update. This is an update record. So I'm saying update account. That's what I've written here. I need to select what we're updating. And in this case, it's customer. What I can now do is I can go and I can select the fields of the customer and add them and decide what I want to do. So I've said here the contact is the customer. It could also potentially be the opportunity or the quote, because in this case we might have an opportunity linked to a quote, but this is what we're doing. The next thing I'm using is an if, so it's a simple decision. Let's have a look. So in this case, we're saying if the opportunity is not empty. So what's happening here is we're saying, okay, we have a quote that's been updated. We know there's going to be an account, so we can safely go and update the account. But we just want to check, is this quote actually linked to an opportunity? Because you could just do standalone quotes, of course. And if it is, what we want to do is then now go and update the related opportunity. And we're going to set the stage to quote accepted and the status to 1. So you can see now, if we take a look at our available list of items down the left-hand side, we've got email, we have SMS, we've got a decision, we've got a wait, we have an assign, we have a create record and an update record. Even with these simple building blocks, we can do some quite useful and interesting workflows. So I'll jump back to my automations page again. Update key fields we've just done. When a quote's updated, when a sales order's updated. Let's use the final trigger that we have, which is a schedule. So what I'm going to do, I'll just go back here again. And what I've done is on a schedule. So in this case, it's exactly the same as before. I choose my type of record. And what I'm saying is every day at 9:30, run this automation. Now, I have picked my criteria. The due date is tomorrow, and the balance amount is greater than 0. So we're looking for an invoice that's due tomorrow and is as yet unpaid. So what we're going to do is, first of all, send an email. And all of these send emails are basically going to be the same. They're going to instead of it being a relative, this time it's going to the contact role of invoice. So in other words, all of the invoice contacts at that customer. We could also just change that and say, go to the send to, if we wanted. Either one would work, depends on how you've got your data set up. And in this case, the template is invoice due tomorrow. It's coming from the admin team. Then we're going to wait for 1 day. So we can wait for days, hours, or minutes. Then we're going to send an additional email. Your invoice is due today. Now we're going to wait for 3 days. We're going to send another email. Your non-payment causes me displeasure. Now we're going to use a credit stop. So we've waited 3 days. Customer still hasn't paid. We apply a credit stop, and what we just do is we update the customer. So we drag on update record. We choose customer, and then we add the field stop credit and mark it as ticked. Then finally, or almost finally, we're going to create a note. So what we've done here is we've grabbed the create record, drag that on, and we fill in the details. So this is just a note. And in this case, the account is being placed on hold due to an overdue invoice. Now, obviously, you're not going to be popping your customers on credit hold if they're 2-3 days overdue for an invoice. But this is just the way that our automation system works. So it's just an easy way to demonstrate it without getting into the nuances of credit policy. Finally, after the credit note, we're sending an email, and what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, we're actually going to send it to the company's account manager. So, the person that's responsible for this organization knows that their customer has been placed on credit hold. And again, just for the purposes of the demo, I've just used the same template over and over again. But obviously, you would go and define mission appropriate email templates for all of the different communications that you wanted to send. So that is really how the automation system inside Tall Emu works. You are able to go and look in automation's history and see when they've run, what they've done. That's it. So your imagination really is the only thing that's stopping you. If anything functionally stops you, by all means, let us know. And we'll take a look and we'll try to modify the system to help you. If you get stuck, drop us an email via the help desk and we'll see what we can do. Thanks a lot for your time.